Hello, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Tom Pelphrey, the Emmy nominated star of Ozark, brilliant performance, and now is seen in Max's limited series Love and Death, where he plays Don Crowder, the aggressive and angry attorney for Candy Montgomery. We'll dive
Yeah,
into that in a second, but Tom, how are you?
great, great. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. So when we look at Don Crowder, obviously you've got these great scripts by David E. Kelly. What helped you most find who Don was as a character? And one thing that I love, this little nuance that is in there, is one of the first times that we see him when he's being engaged to represent Candy as he's sitting by the pool sunning. And I was just like, for whatever reason, that was a brilliant little character touch, but it took me completely by surprise. So expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many of the gems with Don were just real. We just pulled them from his real life. Don was very fond of being tan. Don liked to make sure his hair was looking good. But Robert Udishin, Don's law partner, was one of our advisors on the show, and I got to speak to Robert a few times before we started filming, and he told me, that at the lunch hour at the law firm, Don would go up to the roof and tan. Or he'd have like his running shorts with him and he'd take off his shirt and go for a run because he was also really into fitness.
Mhm.
Um, so all these little gems, all these little wonderful, idiosyncratic things that Don does, they're all real. They're all just pulled from the actual man and the sort of quirky things that he did.
That's fantastic. I mean, it must be so much fun to play somebody who was quirky like that. It's not just your
Yeah.
standard attorney. It gives you nuances and shading to add to your performance.
It's the most fun I've had playing a role. I mean, it's hands down like maybe since doing a play, certain plays in college or something, but it was just the most fun. He's idiosyncratic, he's quirky, and also there was something very freeing about playing a character who's not internally conflicted.
Mhm.
He just sort of knows what he wants, he's confident, and he goes after it. I think usually I'm playing somebody who's wrestling more on the inside.
Mhm.
Mm.
So does that confidence in knowing what he wants and how to get it, is that what kind of leads to his what I'll call aggression and anger in the courtroom when he's dealing with the judge? Because it seems like he comes in there and everything he's at a 9 on the anger scale the minute he sets foot in the courtroom.
Well, that judge was also a famous judge in Texas at the time and also had a very big reputation, kind of a very big ego, like things done his way. Sometimes that judge in court, and we didn't even want to go this far, would wear gigantic dark sunglasses
Yeah, you see
in
that a
court,
couple of
in his,
times,
in
but
his own
yeah.
court, right? And so with Don, I think right from the beginning, Don didn't like the way the candy was being treated, because at first, obviously, he assumed he didn't do it. But even when he knew that she did, the police, the judge, they were all treating her as if she was 100% guilty from the beginning. And I think there was a lot about that put his back up, which is why I think he was so aggressive with the police and with the judge right from the beginning. And then also, I think Don's was just kind of like an alpha guy, and the judge was trying to alpha him. And they usually you only get one per room.
Right. um One thing that we do know about Don in real life is that he did commit suicide several years after the events of this case. Did that knowledge at all play into how you depicted him, or were you just completely divorced from that?
No, no, I was completely divorced from that. Unfortunately, yeah, I was shocked, heartbroken when I learned that Don took his own life. I really loved learning about this guy and the man he was. I think he was such a fascinating human being. But whatever, drove him to do what he did, it was almost, well, it was at least 15 years after the case.
Right.
And I won't speculate as to why someone does that, but no, I think the sort of beauty of a character like Don is there are certain people have the ability to just 100% be doing a thing while they're doing it.
Mhm.
And I think when he decided to defend her, he was 100% defending her. He wasn't doubting it. He wasn't thinking he made the wrong decision. He wasn't wondering what he should do differently. I think he was just, and maybe that's kind of the, you know, probably part of the fun of the character.
Right. When you're, obviously he takes on this case. He's not a criminal defense attorney. It wasn't his kind of specialty, right? So I mean, he was bending the rules a little bit for her. And then, you know, he does doggedly defend her, even, when he initially thinks she's innocent, she's wrongly accused. Then he finds out, it was in self-defense, and he doggedly pursues that. What drives that, do you think, in that character to be so defensive of her?
Well, they were friends.
Yeah.
They there was a very small community and they were friends. They were on the church board together. They would
Mhm.
see each other all the time. And so there's a little part of it that I'm sure is that, but also, you know, they charge her with murder one. She
Mm.
wasn't guilty of murder one. Like regardless of whether you think justice was served or not, but if you go by a strict interpretation of what she was charged with, then
Premeditation.
you have to find her not guilty,
Yeah.
because the idea that she premeditated that is, and so that's just the legal side of it. But then on the and this is me inferring as an actor, but I think he saw something in the under hypnosis with Dr. Faison that spooked him
Mhm.
and that moved him, you know. Um, I think we understand these things so much better today, that someone can have PTSD, that someone can have pain that's so buried that they don't even kind of know how it's lashing out and things like that. But I think back then, especially for a guy like him to like be in a psychiatrist's office, and I promise Don never did that on his own, uh, and to see somebody have such a visceral, painful experience, I think I think that moved him. And I think he felt defensive of that, you know, to say, like, no, that's real and that can make you do horrible things.
Right. When given his dogged defense and relationship, obviously platonic relationship, but his friendship with Candy, it seems it's not extensively explored in the series, but it seems to have an impact on his marriage. His wife has, there's a moment where he gets in the car, she's sitting in the car. Talk to me about what, kind of how you played that moment, what you thought, this case was doing to his relationship with his wife.
I love that question. Right before we started filming, Olivia, who plays Carol, brought me this article that she found, and it was an article about Don Crowder from the late 90s after he had committed suicide. And the article was primarily an interview with Carol. And Don and Carol divorced before then, and Don had remarried. But I thought this told me everything I need to know. Carol said that Don was her best friend until the day he died.
Mm.
And as someone who has, been around plenty of divorces, that's really special. I think it's really special for a couple to get divorced and stay best friends for the rest of their life. That sort of tells me something about, one, the people that they are, and then two, the quality of communication that they must have shared.
Mhm.
And when I first got that scene, when Carol gets Don out of the jail and they get in the car and she's sort of coming at him, and I'm like, oh, the first instinct is like, man, he's exhausted, like he's trying his best, and now his wife's gonna get on him about this, and just one of those scenes that on the page, you're like, this could be a fight. We could play this more like a fight. But I always, I just that reading that article and hearing Carol say that he was her best friend, I was like, I said to Olivia, and she was totally on board. Like, let's not fight.
Mhm.
Let's just talk. Like she has a valid point. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
These are our friends too, and it's not nice what you're doing. And he also has a valid point, which is like, I'm doing my job.
Mhm.
It sucks,
Yeah.
but that's my job. I don't know. Just I like that you asked that question. That little scene meant a lot to me. There's just sometimes where the things and then we only get to have this when it's a real person, but the things we know about the person cause us to play a scene differently than I would have. I
Yeah.
mean, 99 times out of 100, that scene would have been more of a fight.
Right.
But I liked how they listened to each other.
Yes. And it's a great moment. It stuck out to me. That's why I asked it, is because it's a brief moment within all of the histrionics that happened throughout the series, but it is a nice quiet moment, and it provides a nice shading to his character. It's a
Yeah.
good juxtaposition against what's all of the rage that he shows in the courtroom.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I mean you're right though. He's such a as Robert said, he was like Don Crowder never walked into a room that everybody didn't know Don Crowder just walked into. So that was but we get to see all the snapshots of him we see are him in public doing his job, and
Right.
very almost non-existent is the little pieces of Don the man just in private life. So
Yeah. You have a fantastic scene partner in Elizabeth Olsen, obviously, who plays
yeah.
Candy Montgomery. Talk to me about your process together working through your scenes.
I mean, it was very much, show up on the day prepared and which look in so many ways is when you can really have that with a partner, when you can really just, I'm going to show up fully in the zone of what I want to do, and you're going to show up fully in the zone of what you want to do, and then we're going to let those things smash
Mhm.
into each other while we're filming and take it from there. And I mean, there was no talking about anything, there was no planning, there was no rehearsing before time or going over ideas, and I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, Elizabeth is obviously so talented, but she's also just so prepared. Like
Mhm.
she's such a professional. Um, it was such a pleasure to work with her. Like it's so much fun, and it's also so freeing when you know that not only is your partner as talented as Elizabeth is, but like she's never going to leave you hanging. Like she's right there in it, and uh, it's just a great way to show up to work. It was just makes you a better actor. you know
Yeah.
because ideally you don't want to be, I don't know, unless you're doing a play. Do we really want to be working all this stuff out beforehand? Like that's not what people do. Um, and you can really surprise yourself sometimes when you both show up and you know what you're doing, and then you just let it rip.
Right. Last question for you. There's this long storied tradition of actors who play lawyers going through their closing summation, right? I mean, going all the way back to like Gregory Peck and To Kill a Mockingbird, right?
Mhm.
Um, how intimidating was that moment for you, and how did you prepare for that closing sequence?
Oh man, I don't say this with arrogance, but it wasn't intimidating at all. I couldn't wait to do it. I mean, so much with Don, it was like, I've said this before, half in jest, but there was something about showing up to this job and playing this role that I felt the way I'd felt as a high school actor. I
Mhm.
was just excited. Like I remember in high school, like having a speech to work on or working on Shakespeare for the first time. And I would just, I mean, I would go out in my garage in Jersey and just say Shakespeare speeches for 3 hours. Like, because I was discovering this whole world that opened up to me that I didn't know about. And it was so much fun to like play with language and see how you could do things differently. And you know, just all the wonder of like that early exploration. And with David's writing, particularly with Don, as you know, it's a courtroom scene. It's David E. Kelly. He was a lawyer. Like he can write that stuff as good as, if not better than anyone.
Right.
And so like when I read that summation, I was moved. I thought it was so beautiful. I could see the layers in it. I could see how he was threading the story and keeping their attention and also playing with it. So it's like, you know, all the weekends leading up to that, I'm at home in Austin, just drilling the lines and just trying to get it all. So the last thing I'm thinking about is what I need to say next. And um, I was excited to do it. You know, when you get good writing and a good character, man, I'm like, I'm just pumped to get to work.
Nice.
You know,
and and I love how this character plays within this series, because you have half of a series where she's romantically linked to a very passive Jesse Plemons character, and then with Alan, and then she is platonically linked to her attorney, who is completely the opposite in every
yeah,
way of Alan Gore. And I think it's a really interesting, it's almost like the show splits itself in half, and then those two halves really complement each other nicely, I think, in the way that you
yeah.
play on.
No, it's really interesting that you point that out. And then throughout it all is just that beautiful performance by Patrick Fugit, who really had to walk a damn tightrope, and I thought he did such a good job.
Yeah.
But you're right though, it is kind of two separate things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the time. Great performance. Best of luck to you in the Emmy season ahead.
Hey, thanks so much, brother. Good talking. We'll talk again soon.
I hope so. Take care. Bye.
Bye.